The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
Happy Monday morning to everybody, and I hope everybody had a great weekend. Hope you got a chance to enjoy yourself. Hope you had some good weather, get some steps. How many steps did you guys get accomplished this weekend? That's the question. I killed it on Saturday. Well, I wouldn't say killed it, but I ended up with around 19,000 on Saturday, so that was nice. That was a good day. Felt nice. So for starters, I kind of want to set the stage a little bit for this week. So kind of cool news. I'm going to definitely launch one, possibly two of the first set of interviews that I did. And that first one was with Wendy Cole, whom I've talked about previously. And again, like I've said, I'm grouping these under these pillars just because I think that gives it a little bit of a structure. And so for Wendy, obviously, she spans several of them, but you know, the authenticity one is really where she's gonna live. And again, I mean, how much more authentic can you be than having sexual reassignment surgery at the age of 67 and saying, hey, you know what? I don't care how old I am. I'm gonna live the life I want to live. So that's pretty authentic. You know what I just realized? It's Memorial Day today. Holy mackerel. And I realized that because a calendar pop-up popped up as I was recording this, and it said Memorial Day. So happy Memorial Day. I should have, how am I not aware of that? I did not even think that to start the episode. I need to, I don't know what I need to do. Anyway. All right. So that's Wendy. And then Jonathan Bogner, whom is under the resilience pillar. And Jonathan's somebody I've known him since probably the year 2000, and he had a heart transplant. I mean, the dude literally had a heart transplant at, I believe, 54, which, you know, to me, being 51, that's pretty nutty. But his resilience is amazing. And I think we'll learn a lot from that as well, because again, I mean, he's the only person I know that has had a heart transplant. So it'll be interesting to get and hear his perspective on, you know, not only that process, but, you know, all the emotions that went into it. He was pretty raw during the episode. So I love that. So that'll be under the resilience tab. So anyway, things are, you know, we're finally moving. We're finally adding some layers to this podcast, which I hope will be good. And so with those episodes, by the way, just a little bit of a prep on those. You know, they are a little bit longer, and they can go anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. So chances are when I release the episode, I'll have to figure out a schedule or something. And anyway, I'd love to hear from everybody. Like how often do you want this? Do you want once a week with a guest, or do you want it to be once every couple weeks? And if you say I want it every day, I want only guests, that's not nice. That means you don't want to just hear from me. Anyway, I'm just kidding. But anyway, yeah, give me thoughts on that. Let me know kind of, I guess, what your appetite is for those, because I do have a lot lined up. I probably have 15 interviews that are in the process of either getting filmed and recorded or edited. So I just need to figure out a release schedule on those. So if you have any thoughts on that, let me know. All right, wanted to do a couple quick pieces of follow-up from the stuff we talked about yesterday. And I had a funny discussion over the weekend with a friend on the Friday episode where I talked about Trump and, you know, why I don't really talk about the Trump trial and all that. And he basically called and said, dude, I'm glad you don't talk about the Trump trial. And I said, really, why? Because actually, and this is funny, and this is actually kind of cool. I mean, this guy hates Trump like more than anything. I've maybe used this joke before, but when I meet somebody that just completely like hates Trump more than life itself, I always joke around and say, did he sleep with your wife or something? God, man, your visceral hate for somebody that you don't know is just insane. And he has that level for Trump. So I was actually surprised because, again, I would have expected him to want me to talk about it or want it covered because, again, it's, for the most part, viewed negatively for Trump. And I said, well, why is that? I'm like, I'm surprised. I thought you would want that. And he said, basically, and I quote, the only guy shadier than Trump is that attorney, Michael Cohen. And their entire case is basically hinged on that dude. And he's shadier than his former boss. And I started laughing. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty true. And man, if you haven't seen that guy, he just looks shady. Bro's got like the feathered hairstyle from the 80s still. And he talks shady. He looks shady. And he is shady, obviously. Again, so anyway, I thought that was funny. I actually told him, I said, hey, I actually genuinely appreciate the fact that your self-awareness is such that you're able to recognize that and articulate that or even voice that to me, because I think he knew I wasn't expecting him to take that stance. But that was a perfect example. And I kind of wanted to use it just a little bit, and I'll end on this in a second. But I mean, to me, that was amazing. Here's a guy who literally cannot stand Trump at all, but he is able to, really rise above to that 30,000 feet and say, hey, okay, I think he's terrible. I think he's shady, but what's going on right now, this is manufactured. And basically that was kind of his stance from the rest of the conversation. So anyway, I thought that was really healthy. I really did. And I told him I was very proud of him. And then he ended the conversation with, okay, anyway, let's grab a happy hour. And then I said, all right, cool. And then he literally did this. He goes, fuck Trump. And then he hung up. And then he texted me and he's like, that was the ending. And I was like, dude, you are funny. All right, I actually wasn't even planning on doing this, but all right, let's stay on this theme a second.
Where are you from?
The Bronx, actually.
I'm originally from the Bronx and from New York.
I'm from the Bronx.
Right here in the Bronx, New York. This is home, right here.
AOC says if you're not a Democrat, you don't belong here in the Bronx. Right. What do you say?
I disagree with that.
I don't think she should be here in the Bronx. I actually don't know any Democrats living in the Bronx.
Look, AOC, look at the tremendous support for Mr. Donald J. Trump.
You need to tell her then she need to stay out the Bronx because look at all the people around. Everybody's here for Trump.
All right, so this was over the weekend in the Bronx, the South Bronx, the South Bronx, the South Bronx, the South Bronx. I forget what rap song that is in. I'm telling you, like 80% of my brain is like music lyrics. Anyway, it's an interesting clip. It's a super interesting clip because you have a ridiculous diversity of people. I'm talking old, young, women, men, Black, white, Hispanic, LGBT, gay, straight, like everything was encapsulated in this montage. And they were all, I guess, gathering in the Bronx in support of Trump. And again, I mean, it's interesting because the diversity of those people, and it basically was in response to, I think Trump was in the Bronx, and then AOC kind of came out and said, you don't belong here, blah, blah, blah. And then all these people gathered, and basically there were even Democrats there.
I am a Democrat, and I belong here.
And who are you voting for?
Donald J. Trump.
What has AOC done for the Bronx?
She's done nothing for the Bronx. Nothing. Nothing's changed. Nothing's gotten any better.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Let her come to the Bronx and let her come among us people that struggle. She doesn't even know what struggle is.
Anyway, definitely a diverse, interesting mix of people. And again, I'm sharing this stuff for those of you that are triggering right now and that are like clenching your teeth in anger. Don't do that. Come on, seriously. Again, I'm sharing this stuff because I'm trying to give you a holistic picture of what's going on. And again, decide for yourself what that means to you. I already know a few people who are going to send me a note and say, oh, those people are fucking idiots. Those people are stupid, da, 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 da. And then it's like, are they? I mean, again, maybe they are. I don't know. I don't know any of those people. All I know is that, as somebody that honestly is a registered independent, as you guys know, and that is trying to just call a spade on stuff, I'm hearing everybody. I want to hear what everybody has to say. I'm very curious. Like here's a perfect two analogies. With as much as the racial divide has tried to be created against Trump and black people, and then also against Trump and, let's say, the LGBT community, I'm incredibly interested / curious / wanting to understand how any black person or any LGBTQ plus person would support Trump. Because again, supposedly he's out for you guys. So then the question becomes, just hearing from them and understanding why they're doing that. And again, like I said, honestly, I cannot stress this enough. Like, you've got to just take it all in, separate your emotions for a minute, listen to everything. And after the end of all of that, again, if you still feel the same way, that's amazing. Great. Have your opinion. But at least now your opinion is one that, is looking at all sides of it, and you're having your own balanced take, which is great. All right. For those of you, insert bromance joke.
I was at the UFC 300 fight cage side, and Mark Zuckerberg was there too, so we had a chat in between some of the fights. He's really into MMA, and so he said, we've become so neutered as a country, right? Why shouldn't we just embrace that we have these human instincts? I've grown to like MMA quite a bit, so I was like, yeah, I agree with you. I said, well, what about that with respect to speech? How do you feel about that? And then he kind of paused for a second. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I think you'd actually make the same argument for just saying that you get to say what you want in this country. We've become too neutered by trying to have central moderators of who decides what you can and can't say.
All right, let me jump in real quick. So that's Vivek, obviously, talking about sitting next to Mark Zuckerberg at a UFC fight, and they're talking about, the neutered state of America. That's a pretty way to describe it. And so he goes from talking about that in a physical aspect to talking about that when it comes to free speech.
His response was, well, look, I'm actually a lot more pro-free speech than people might know. And I've actually known a lot of his own tendencies. I believe that's actually probably true. It's about bending the knee and buckling to pressure. And so what I told him, and he said he would think about it, is if you say you're pro-free speech and you actually mean it, to just say, hey, I screwed up. Locking Donald Trump out of an account, a major president of the United States, and making the decision under pressure, and I screwed up. If you said that, I think that would have a therapeutic effect on the country. That's a form of accountability. There's a part of us that wants vengeance, but there's also part of us that is hungry to forgive.
All right. I mean, again, the dude has good takes. He really does. That's another interesting. First of all, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg will ever come out and apologize about locking Trump out of Facebook, and I believe Instagram as well. There's just no chance. Even if he feels that, he's not going to do that. He's not going to do that because of the share price of the stock and all of the negative publicity that would be heaped on that. So the potential of that is just not going to happen. But does he really feel it? I mean, I don't know. I will say this. I think a lot of guys at that level, when you're talking about not only the wealth, but also obviously the power and the influence, they're not always doing what they want to do. They're doing what they think is going to be in their best interests or the best interest of their company. And I mean, again, I don't know. This is going to be some real talk. I mean, would you be the same? Like, would you basically bow and cave to that pressure? It's a very difficult question to answer until you're at that summit, and at that level where there is that pressure, So for example, in this situation, let's say you didn't necessarily agree with Trump back then, but you were like, okay, you know what? I mean, he's got a right to speak what he wants to speak. And more importantly, I have X million, users on my platforms that actually want to hear from him. And so, no, I'm not going to ban him. I'm not going to ban him just because I don't agree with it. And if you felt that way, would you have not, or would you have basically caved to the pressure? I don't know, man. I don't know. That's a tough one. That is a tough one. I mean, I'd like to say, no, I wouldn't cave to the pressure that people are putting me under. I would stick to my values and stick to my whatever, principles, as long as someone, wasn't crossing, I guess, a ridiculous line. But then again, I mean, the question becomes, what is that line? What is that line, especially when it comes to free speech? What is it that can't be said? That's a tough one. That's definitely a difficult question to ask, because again, I think once you start down that path, it just becomes a slippery slope, and then it becomes a judgment issue, and then it becomes who gets to make that judgment. All right, next, I've got to read you this because this was hilarious. My friend Catherine sent this to me. And so it's basically a meme, and it says, if you ever wonder why Gen X is the way it is, remember that teachers hyped a rocket launch and astronauts that then exploded in front of our face on TV. No counseling, no hugs, no reassurances. They just assigned more homework. That is hilarious. They just assigned more homework. So think about that. I believe it was 1986 when the space shuttle blew up. Hold on, let me check that. Yep, January 26, 1986. I think I was in the 6th grade or the 7th grade. I literally remember exactly where I was. I don't remember which class I was sitting in, but I was sitting in a class at West Geauga Junior High, and we were watching it. I'm sure you all remember. Think back now as I'm telling this little tidbit. Think back to where you were when we watched the space shuttle, go into orbit and explode. And I don't really remember what I was feeling at that point, or like if we were confused or what, but I literally can picture myself sitting in that small chair. But anyway, think back, man. I really don't remember. Maybe I'm wrong here. Was there counseling? Was there, maybe there was actually. For some reason, I'm thinking back now. I do seem to remember the auditorium being somewhere where I guess there could have been counseling. If anybody's memory is better than mine and you remember what took place post explosion, let me know and I'll share that, because again, yeah, for some reason I am thinking there was something, but I will tell you there definitely, I mean, can you imagine that happening today? And the ramifications of that, it definitely would be a lot more than it was back then. And so the whole concept of the badass Gen X generation, I mean, we drank from rusty water pipes because we were thirsty. I love that. That's funny. Somebody asked me one time, they're like, why did you guys, it was like my friend's kid. So it's like, why did you guys drink from garden hoses? And we looked at it, my buddy and I looked at each other, we're like, dude, because A, we were thirsty, and that's how we drank water when we were outside playing all day instead of being in front of our devices like you guys are. Man, what a difference. What a different childhood we had compared to the childhoods of today. And again, I'm not saying better or worse. I'm just saying tremendously different. All right, next topic.
Behind me, you can see a piece of the American pier that was floating off the coast of Gaza. Now, overnight, the Americans were moving the 2 floating piers to the port of Ashdod in southern Israel when one of the pieces got detached from the line and floated ashore here in Ashdod. This U.S. Army vessel came to rescue that piece when it also got stuck. So right now the Americans are working with their Israeli counterparts to try and free this equipment, take it to Ashdod, and then ultimately deploy the pier once again off the coast of Gaza.
All right, I had to talk about this because this is just insane to me. Oh my God. So remember that pier that was being built off the coast of Gaza in order to bring in humanitarian aid, which literally could just be brought in through the roads that link Israel to Gaza. I mean, come on, give me a break on this. It's like $350 million pier being built in order to then bring humanitarian aid using ships into Gaza, when literally you could just use the roads that have been there for 100 years. I mean, I'm not going to talk too much more on this because honestly, there was so much like misinformation about was the pier washed away or were the ships that were anchored to it washed away. So I'm trying to get some clarity. But the bottom line is there was tremendous issues that are going to cost another ridiculous sum of money in order to correct, to again get people food and resources so they can not starve and go into a famine. Honestly, if you really can't see that one for what it is, man, I don't know. That is a pretty cut and dry situation that just does not make sense to me. Like, again, it doesn't make sense. Like, just let the humanitarian aid in. You know, bottom line is whether you do it through the pier or through the roads, supposedly you're letting it in, right? And it's again, hopefully, fingers crossed, getting to the civilians, the innocent civilians that need it. So why make that process more difficult than it needs to be if the end goal is supposed to be the same? Give that some thought. I'm going to leave you with that today. Good week ahead. Call a spade, and we will talk to you soon.
The ending was terrific.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.